Today we're diving into cases with unexpected and surprising twists. This story is both shocking and complicated, with more twists than you could ever imagine. This isn't your typical murder story. It's a tale of multiple tragedies intertwined in an almost unbelievable way. Sharon Marshall was a bright teenager with a promising future. She was a top student and a lieutenant colonel in the ROTC. In 1986, Sharon graduated from high school in Forest Park, Georgia, and earned a full scholarship to study aerospace engineering at the Georgia Institute of Technology. But Sharon had a secret. She was pregnant during her last months of high school and didn't tell her boyfriend. Sharon gave birth and let a wealthy couple from Texas adopt the baby boy. This changed her life plans, and she even tried to run away with her boyfriend. After missing her chance to go to college, Sharon moved to Tampa, Florida, with a man named Franklin Delano Floyd. In Tampa, Sharon started dating another man and got pregnant again. This time, Sharon decided to keep the baby and raise him with Frank. In 1988, she gave birth to her son, Michael Gregory Marshall. Sharon and Frank had a complicated relationship, but they lived together and took care of Michael. Frank worked as a painter but often couldn't work due to back problems. Sharon became an exotic dancer to support them, and they also relied on welfare checks. Sharon was friendly and kind, especially to her close friend, 18-year-old Cheryl Comesso. But Frank and Cheryl often argued, and there were rumors of a brief relationship. In 1989, Frank, Sharon, and Cheryl went on a boating trip where Frank and Cheryl had a fight. After the fight, Cheryl reported Sharon to social services for hiding her income as an exotic dancer to keep getting welfare checks. Angry about Cheryl's report, Frank confronted her outside the club where Sharon and Cheryl worked. Witnesses said Frank hit Cheryl. Soon after, Cheryl went missing. Her abandoned car was found at the airport, and an investigation began. Frank and Sharon were suspects, but there was no evidence linking them to Cheryl's disappearance. They quickly left the area using different names. In 1989, Frank and Sharon got married. Frank said it was to give Sharon's son his family name, but they often used aliases. They moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where Sharon worked as an exotic dancer again. Sharon made friends easily, but Frank was disliked for his aggressive behavior. Before she could leave Frank, Sharon was found unconscious by a highway, appearing to be a hit-and-run victim. Frank claimed he was asleep at the time. Sharon was taken to the hospital but never woke up. Her friends visited her, but Frank soon banned them from seeing her. 5 days later, Sharon died from her injuries. Many were suspicious of Frank's actions, especially since Sharon seemed to be getting better, before suddenly dying. The doctor noticed old bruises on Sharon's body and classified her death as a homicide, suggesting the head injury might not have been caused by a vehicle. Frank tried to claim the $80,000 life insurance policy he had taken out on Sharon, but his use of aliases caused problems. Frank had a long criminal history. At 19, he was convicted of abducting and assaulting a 4-year-old girl and sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. He escaped from a mental hospital by stealing a car. The day after his escape, Frank robbed a bank and was caught again. In 1972, he was released but soon tried to abduct a woman and was arrested again. Frank paid bail but skipped his court date, leading to a federal warrant for his arrest. He used fake names while on the run. Frank's real name was revealed when he tried to claim the life insurance. He was captured in Georgia and sent back to prison. Frank had given Michael to social services before going on the run. Michael was placed with a loving foster family but showed signs of trauma, being nonverbal and distressed. Frank insisted he was Michael's father, but a DNA test revealed he wasn't. The visit stopped, but the story was far from over. After serving 4 years in prison, Frank was released in September 1994. He began stalking Michael and his foster parents in Oklahoma, planning to take Michael back. On September 12, 1994, Frank went to Michael's elementary school and demanded to see the principal, James Davis. When he wasn't allowed to take Michael, Frank pulled out a gun and threatened Davis. Michael was taken from the school without anyone noticing. Frank forced the principal to drive them a few miles away. Frank tied the principal to a tree and drove off with Michael in the principal's truck. A massive search began when the abduction was discovered. 2 months later, Frank was found in Louisville, Kentucky, but Michael was missing. Despite extensive searches, Michael was never found. Frank refused to reveal his location, saying, "It's none of your business where he is." During Frank's trial for kidnapping Michael, skeletal remains were found in Pinellas County, Florida. The victim had died from a beating and gunshot wounds. A mechanic in Kansas found an envelope with 97 photos of a beaten woman in a truck once owned by Frank. The photos matched the remains found in Florida. The remains were identified as Cheryl Camesso. Frank was convicted of kidnapping Michael and sentenced to 52 years in prison. Frank was also found guilty of Cheryl's murder and sentenced to death. The photos also showed Frank assaulting a young girl, leading to another twist in the case. A search began to identify the girl in the older photos. In 2014, Sharon's true identity was uncovered. Sharon Marshall was actually Suzanne Marie Savakis, a girl kidnapped by Frank as a child. Frank had raised Suzanne as his own daughter, later marrying her and possibly killing her. In 2014, Frank admitted to killing Michael and hiding his body along Interstate 35. Despite extensive searches, Michael's body was never found. Frank remains on death row for Cheryl's murder, and many believe he is also responsible for Sharon's death.